Welcome, and thank you for attending this training on the MI-APPP data forms that are entered into the REDCap system. We here at MPHI are the evaluators of MI-APPP, meaning we deal with most things involving data. We support the staff at MDHHS to ensure they are getting the information they need. MDHHS uses this information for two purposes. The first is to understand the outcomes of the program and how to improve the program for the future. And second, to report the federal government performance measures. MPHI is responsible for training MI-APPP site staff on how to use the data collection forms and how to enter data that goes into REDCap. Throughout this training, I will be referencing the MI-APPP case management and data entry process map, as well as the REDCap status timeline, which are posted on the MI-APPP Google Drive. If you do not have access to this Google Drive, please contact MPHI. Another helpful set of resources available to you to learn more about the MI-APPP forms are the case management and supplemental service code books, which can also be found on the MI-APPP Google Drive. Now on to our process map. When looking at the process map, the recruitment phase is first. During the recruitment phase, you need to fill out the recruitment form and the status and case manager change form. You will notice on the process map there are 3 different data entry steps that need to be completed in REDCap during the recruitment phase: adding a new record, filling out the status/case management change form, and the recruitment form. A client should be entered as recruiting status if they are a potential client that has not yet signed the consent form. You should not use this status for clients who are taking a temporary break from the program. It is possible for a client to move from the recruiting to active status on the same day if the client signs the consent form. If the client ultimately decides not to become active, you can terminate them directly from recruiting status. The recruitment form is to be filled out when a potential client has expressed interest in the program. This is the only form that does not need to be filled out with the client. All other forms, the client needs to be present when you're filling them out. Now, this form is used to help keep track of clients that are being recruited and to learn how we tend to engage or recruit youth. So the recruitment form will ask you to fill out the date of the initial outreach contact. So basically when the client expressed interest, as well as how they were referred. There's also space for notes. So this document essentially allows us to understand how many people that are being recruited actually enroll and how long that process takes from recruitment to enrollment. The status/case manager change form is to be filled out when a client changes their status or switches case managers. The purpose of this form is to document a change in client status or a change in case manager. Please note that keeping this form up to date is critical, as this information helps supervisors and MDHHS see each case manager's active caseload and clients in recruitment. Back to our process map. The next phase is the enrollment phase. During this phase, you and your client will fill out 3 forms together: the enrollment form, the consent form, and the status and case manager change. Each agency has its own consent form, and we just previously covered the status/case manager change form, so we will only be covering the enrollment form right now. Looking back at our timeline, a client should be entered as active status once they have signed the consent to participate. This active date is important, as it determines when other forms should be collected. For example, case managers must complete the CBA within 60 days of making the client active. A follow-up form for all active clients must be completed every 6 months following their active status. It is also important to note that if a client wishes to re-enroll, you should change their status to active and fill out a follow-up form if they were terminated fewer than 6 months ago, or fill out a new CBA if they were terminated more than 6 months ago. Just to repeat that, if a client wishes to re-enroll, you should change their status to active and fill out a follow-up form if they were terminated fewer than 6 months ago, or fill out a new CBA if they were terminated more than 6 months ago. The enrollment form is to be filled out once a client is ready to enroll in the program and has signed the consent form. The purpose of this form is to document when a client is being enrolled or re-enrolled, and to capture key client background and demographic information at the time of enrollment. This form captures the client name, age, date of birth, whether this is a first-time enrollment or re-enrollment, the case manager, education status, last grade completed, address and phone, social media information, gender, and pregnant and parenting status. The next phase on the process map is the initial assessment phase. During this phase, you and your client will fill out 2 forms together, the CBA and the AUX packet, which you may also see and refer to as the auxiliary assessment packet. The CBA, or the Comprehensive Baseline Assessment, is to be filled out within 60 days of when the client fills out the consent form. The purpose of the CBA is to systematically collect, record, and analyze client information to serve as a basis for developing the initial individual service plan. Now, the CBA is completed in an interview format and is designed to help you build rapport with your client. Questions are set up to move into more and more personal information over the course of the conversation. The auxiliary assessment packet is to be filled out with every milestone, including the CBA and all of the follow-ups at the 6-month intervals. On the front page of the auxiliary packet, you'll find the client name, the date, the case manager, and you'll check the box here for the milestone that this auxiliary packet is associated with. The next page is the developmental asset profile, which is not pictured here. This tool is used to help identify a set of skills, experiences, relationships, and behaviors that enable young people to develop into successful, contributing adults. Now, these questions are centered around the following categories: personal, social, family, school, and community. So the developmental assets profile asks, some case managers will just ask teens these questions as an interview, and others will have teens fill it out sort of like it's a questionnaire. It really depends on the teen's preference as well as their literacy. So it's intended essentially to be a snapshot of where they're at today. And the important thing to remember about the developmental asset profile, or the DAP, is that it's something that we send to you. You do not print these yourself. There is a copyright on the DAP assessment tool, so you're not allowed to print it or copy it. So just let us know when you need more copies here at MPHI, and we will send them out. Last is the service matrix, which you'll see on the right here, which assesses the client's needs. For the CBA, we are largely interested in what the teen's needs are when we first start working with them, and what referrals we give them at the first time that we're working with them. So when this same form is filled out at later time points, we'll be able to see how these needs have changed over time with MI-APPP. And we also use it to look at what needs are eventually met by MI-APPP services and if teens are getting referrals and following up with them. That means it's important to keep track of the various kinds of services you provide and referrals you give, so you can get credit for that at the 6-month follow-up with every client. So each column has a checkbox answer. If the client has a need for this service, just check the box. If the client received a related service from MI-APPP, place a check there. And if the client was referred to another program for this need, you place a check there. Obviously, if a client received a service or a referral in a particular category, you need to make sure that the box is checked saying that they had that need, because they shouldn't be receiving any services or referrals when they don't have a need. Back to our process map. The next phase on the process map is the follow-up. During this phase, you and your client will fill out the 2 forms together, the follow-up form and the auxiliary packet. Since we just covered the auxiliary packet, we'll only be covering the follow-up form now. The follow-up form is to be completed with each client every 6 months after enrollment. The form can be completed up to 1 month before or 1 month after the 6-month time frame and still be considered on time. The purpose of this form is to gather updated information on the client and their children at regular intervals. The follow-up form should be dated with the actual date of the case manager's follow-up interview, and it should be thought of as a snapshot in time of the client's circumstances. The questions, as they appear on the form, are in the same order as the gray boxes with questions that you see on the CBA. Each year around the time of the 12-month follow-up and the 24-month follow-up, you will also want to revisit the CBA with your clients to see if anything has changed. Please note that this does not mean you should complete a new CBA every year or that you should change any data in the system from the original CBA. It just means you should get out the paper copy from your first CBA interview with them and review the questions as part of your ongoing case management support to see if anything big has changed in their lives. The next phase in the process map is to either continue the program or to exit. If your client is continuing the program, you would continue filling out the follow-up forms every 6 months. And if your client is exiting, you will fill out the termination form and the status/case manager change form, which we already covered. If a client has successfully completed the program or decides to leave the program or is unable to be reached for 3 or more months, they should be changed to terminated status. Clients can be terminated even if they haven't completed the CBA. That means a client can be terminated from active status or from recruiting status. A client can be made active again after being terminated. You can do this by completing a status case management change form, making them active, and completing another enrollment form with details about their re-enrollment. The termination form is to be completed once a client meets criteria for termination from the program, as we discussed when we looked at the status timeline. The purpose of this form is to track when clients exit the program, to track reasons for termination, and to allow us to capture information on outcomes that clients experience during the program. Now, this form has outcomes associated with it, so when we lose track of someone, you will still get credit for the outcomes that they experienced while in the program. This form will also prevent you from having to complete an education update form at the end of the school year for clients who were terminated during the year. So we're going to talk about some of the as-needed case management forms, including the pregnancy update form and the education update form. The pregnancy update form is to be filled out with male and female clients who have a new repeat pregnancy or who experience a live birth or fetal death. This form is broken down into two different sections. Section A should be filled out if your client has a new repeat pregnancy. Section B should be completed if your client has had an outcome of a previously reported pregnancy. Please note, there is some skip logic in this form. So for example, when you fill out Section B, question 2, if you select 1 live birth, you will skip questions 3 through 8 and answer questions 9 through 16. You just kind of have to pay attention. Next, we look at the education update form, which is to be filled out after a client has an education change, such as graduation, dropout, earning a GED, etc. This form allows you to keep track of where students are in their education, which is an aspect of clients' lives that can change often. It's important that you track changes in education status, as these are critical outcomes of the program. We need to know if folks got their GED, if they dropped out but then re-enrolled in school, or even if they stayed in school. So we can demonstrate that you all are doing great things to keep your clients actively engaged in their educational goals. So most often you'll be completing this form for active clients at the end of the school year, sometime in June. We will send you an email to remind you to fill this out with your clients, just to indicate, yes, they completed a grade, for example. Finally, we have the Supplemental Services form. It's also for use as needed. Please note that the Supplemental Service form is entered into a separate REDCap project, the database project, from the rest of the forms. So just keep this in mind. That's why it's orange. Only non-case management clients should be filling out this form. Just to repeat, any client in case management should not be filling out this form. This form is only for supplemental service clients. So those attending one-time events, ongoing support groups, family fun days, supplemental services as we know them. If it is an ongoing service, such as a support group, you are to fill out the form every 3 months. In contrast, if it is a discrete one-time event, they need to fill out the form for every event. This is what the supplemental service form looks like. In addition, you'll see at the top here an instruction to participants to stop filling out this form if they're in case management, because they shouldn't be. We have some demographics, information about their pregnancy status or how they're connected to a pregnant and parenting team. And then we ask them what kind of needs they have, and they just check the box. And then if your staff provides a service related to one of these needs, you can put a check in there. Or if you provide a referral related to one of these needs, you can put a check in there. That just helps you get credit for the services and the referrals that you give to clients who may not be in case management, but who you are serving through supplemental services. And the final form we will cover today is the contact log, which is an ongoing form that you will fill out every time you are in communication with a client who's in recruiting or active status. The contact log will look pretty much like this. So you can see for each client interaction, you will fill out the date of the contact, the type of contact using one of these legends here. Was it at home? Was it in your office? Was it out in the field? Was it a group meeting? Was it a phone conversation? Was it talking to someone on their behalf? Was it a letter, an email, or another category? And you can fill in the activity if it was a PYD code. So if you did one of the PYD activities, such as the My Care Plan, the My Goal Sheet, you can fill that out here. And then you fill out exactly the number of minutes that you spent doing that activity. If it is a non-PYD activity, such as just checking in, following up about how their life's going, then you would put a 00 for the activity type. Finally, we do have an activity type here of doing a CBA or a follow-up, so you can mark time spent doing those data collection activities as well. So we'll be going over a brief example of the contact log. So here's a scenario. There was a field visit contact on November 15th, 2017. A half hour was spent checking in, and a half hour was spent on the taking care of my child activity. You would enter this information into the contact log just as you see it on your screen here. Those who are familiar with the old contact log format will recognize it up here. However, the contact log format we use now is down here. So the first line has the date. The type is FV for field visit. There were 30 minutes of just catching up, just checking in. So that's a non-PYD activity for 30 minutes. And then we have, on the same date, that same field visit was an activity of TC for taking care of my child. 30 minutes was the time spent on that, and there weren't any corresponding notes. Should you have any questions about how to complete your contact logs, MDHHS is an excellent resource in that arena. So the final thing we'll cover today is a tool called the Face Sheet. This is a document for your client files that you can use to keep track of what forms are due. Currently, REDCap does not have the capability to notify you when a client is due for a form update. So this sheet helps serve that function. Once your client has signed the consent form and is in active status, you should fill out the client name and the date they signed the consent form at the top. And once the date the consent form was signed is filled out, this is an Excel sheet, so the remaining due dates for all forms will auto-populate. So this Excel sheet should be found on the Google Drive as well. Refer back to this document periodically or even print it out and put it in your case file so you can know when a due date is coming up. And you can also mark on here when it's been completed and the date it was completed. This can be a good tool for supervisors helping their case managers keep on top of their dates, as well as case managers to know that they're on track. So this is not a required form, and it will not be entered into REDCap, but it can be a helpful tool. Thank you so much for joining us to view the MI-APPP forms training. If you have any questions on specific details or response options for each of the forms presented today, like what does this question mean? You can refer to the MI-APPP Case Management Forms Codebook or the MI-APPP Supplemental Service Forms Codebook, which are stored on the MI-APPP Google Drive. You can also, of course, always reach out to us here at MPHI. We are more than happy to help. This will be the first in our series of 2 trainings. So next you can watch the MI-APPP REDCap training and learn more about how to enter your data into the data system. Thank you.